Hello, fellow cyborgs, and welcome to the final day of Quotidian Cyborg. But let's not get too sad, and let's get on with today's video, which is my September reading wrap-up. I managed to read 11 books in September, and I'm going to talk about all of them, even though some of them you have heard of before. The first thing I picked up in September was The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark, which I buddy read with Lauren from Lauren and the Books. This, I think I gave 3 out of 5 stars, if I remember correctly. I enjoyed Muriel Spark's writing style more than the actual plot of this. She uses this really interesting thing where she will introduce a character and then tell you like what happens to them 20 years down the line and then jump back to present day, and I really liked how she condensed time in order to make people stick out in your brain a little bit more. I also really liked the way that she described characters, and I really appreciated how much she packed into such a relatively short read. So I enjoyed this, but I am very intrigued to try more by Muriel Spark in the future. Then I read A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest J. Gaines, which you saw me try the first chapter of in my Black Writers Matter Try a Chapter tag, and then I hauled it in my Black Writers Matter book haul. So this starts off with Jefferson, who's a young black man who is witness to an attempted robbery of a grocery store and then murder of 3 people. He is charged with the murder of the white store owner, sentenced to death by electrocution. Grant, who is from that town and has recently moved back after going to university, is asked by Jefferson's godmother and his aunt to go and talk to Jefferson and make him a man before he dies. During Jefferson's trial, Jefferson's defense attorney calls him like a mindless hog. How could he possibly have committed this thought-through murder when this is like a pig of a man? So that's something that Jefferson and Jefferson's family really focus on and really want to rile against. They want Jefferson to be able to walk with dignity to his death. I liked this and gave it 3 out of 5 stars. However, it took like halfway through the book for Grant to even visit Jefferson, and I found Grant to be a rather irritating character. He did not want to have to go visit Jefferson. He did not want to be in his hometown. He was so unsatisfied with his life and just kept talking about it without actually doing anything about it. And I think that this definitely plays around with the theme of how stuck in as like second-class citizens Black people are and have been, especially this is a historical novel in the 1940s. This also really well done shows the passive-aggressive racism of the time, so how you would be made to wait 15 minutes to do a simple purchase at a department store rather than like, you know, be thrown tomatoes at you or being called the N-word, stuff like that, you know, things that white people would never have to deal with, but that Black people just have to shut up and take. So I liked this, but it wasn't the sort of discourse on mortality that I was hoping it would be, which is why I got 3 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up Backwater by Joan Bauer, which was a recent acquisition for 25 cents from a library bookstore. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved this. This is a children's / YA book. It's YA before it was called YA. Our protagonist is 16. Ivy wants to be a genealogist and wants to be a historian, but she has grown up in a family of lawyers, like generations after generations of lawyers. So she very much is like the black sheep in her family. And her family also, there is one other black sheep, Josephine, her aunt, who has left the family and no one talks about her. So Ivy has to go on an adventure to try to understand her familial history and see if she can find this aunt that she might have a kindred soul with. This turns into a icy mountain climbing adventure sort of story at the end, but all in all, this is a story about trying to find yourself and embrace who you are, and this is very pro-introvert. There's a really beautiful passage where Aunt Josephine is talking to her brother, Ivy's dad, about how he misinterpreted her entire personality as a child. He thought she was attention seeking, whereas she just wanted to be left alone, stuff like that. It was really, really excellent. I highly enjoyed this. It's very, very wintry. It's not over the top. It's subtle, but has really thought through messages, and I just really loved this. Next, I finished listening to Dark Days by Derek Landy. The audiobook is narrated by Rupert Dagos, who is my favorite. However, his performance in this audiobook, which is the final audiobook he's done for the series, was not up to par. One one thing that wasn't his control, but in the first 3 audiobooks, there's these intro and outro musics that are spookily and jazzy and really just cool. And I guess they decided that since Dark Days covers more dark topics and Valkyrie is more of like a YA age rather than a middle grade age, that suddenly we don't need music anymore. Like adult audiobooks need to be boring and they can't be fun, which just really disappointed me because I love the atmosphere that those intro and outros create. He also didn't keep accents right throughout what he had in the books previous, and there was also this one conversation between 2 characters that he completely flubbed and spoke the lines for the wrong character in the wrong voice, if that makes any sense. So that was a really disappointing thing for the last audiobook of Skulduggery Pleasant that I have. There are other audiobooks of Skulduggery Pleasant narrated by someone else, but I'm not really interested in listening to those. So now I have to continue on my reread by reading them physically, which makes me nervous because I'm notoriously very bad at putting rereads into my reading months, but let's fingers crossed that I can get a couple more books under my belt before the end of the year. As far as plot goes though, this is just awesome. I still gave it 5 stars even if the audiobook experience was a bit of a bummer, but the Skulduggery Pleasant series is just one of my favorites. It's so good, and if you haven't tried it, and especially around Halloween, I think this would be a lovely series to give a try. There are walking and talking skeletons, sorcerers, vampires, spider people, all sorts of spooky things. Then I read St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves by Karen Russell. This was a buddy read with Hillary from Your Robot Friend, and we had a really lovely time chatting about this because both of us were kind of underwhelmed by these stories. For me, these stories felt very much like Karen Russell had a cool idea for a world, but she didn't have a plot for any of the stories and she didn't have any unique characters. The same sorts of characters were in here over and over again. You had the adolescent protagonist who gets up to some sort of mischief. You have an absent parent, and you have some sort of like paranormal or spooky, questionable, magical realism sort of things going on. My main gripe with this is that the stories felt like they ended 2 chapters too early. I know these are short stories and they don't have chapters, but you would get to the climax of the story and then it would just end. There was no resolution, there was no wrap up, there was no nothing. It was like she didn't know where to go with the rest of the plot, so she just stopped writing. And for me, that was incredibly frustrating because what I want in my short stories is I want there to be an actual story in here. I want it to feel like the story's the best length for it would be as a short story, not as a novella, not as a novel. And with these, it didn't feel like she had stories to tell. She had ideas about worlds to tell, and that wasn't enough for me. But just not to end on a bad note, the 2 stories that I liked best were Haunting Olivia and Out to Sea. Then the Slowathon started, and I read 3 books during the Slowathon, which I've already talked a bit about, but I'm going to talk about them a bit more here as well. So this is Our Endless Number Days by Claire Fuller. I buddy read this with Acacia Ives, as I did the following 2 books as well. So this was definitely not what I was expecting. The fairy tale themes in here are excellent, but this takes place 3/4 out of the book, takes place back in Peggy's past timeline in the forests in Germany, and this turned into very much a book, at least superficially, about surviving in the wild in a cabin in the woods and having to be self-sustaining. There was such a twist, a chilling twist at the end of here, which I didn't think was coming, and I think that because now I know what that twist is, rereading it might be a much more rich sort of experience. But the end kind of confused me, and so I had to talk with it about Acacia and figure out like what exactly this meant. But overall, I really enjoyed the writing style. I thought that the characters were psychologically very deep. I really appreciated that. I liked the atmosphere. I thought it was really well done, and this was a 4 out of 5 very enjoyable reading experience. Then I finished White Oleander by Janet Fitch, and this has been on my mental TBR for ages, ever since I read Paint It Black by Janet Fitch. This did not disappoint. I liked this at equal levels as with Painted Black, which both have gotten 4 out of 5 stars from me. I enjoyed the writing style so much. The psychological depth was really interesting. I loved all of the characters. I mean, I didn't love them all, but they were all fully formed characters and people that had psychological depth, that history, had futures, and they were really fun to get to know, even though this covers so many dark and hard-hitting topics, but it wasn't too dark for me, of which I appreciated. The only thing that left off that last star was because the atmosphere in here wasn't my favorite. It took place in Los Angeles. It took place in some very out of control, claustrophobic sort of social situations, which made me feel uncomfortable and antsy, which is what it was supposed to do. But because I wasn't in complete joy whilst reading this, I couldn't give it the full 5 stars. But any other thing that Janet Fitch comes out with, any new novel, please come out with another novel. I will for sure be reading it because I think she is masterful. Then I finished The No You Never Listened To by Maggie Royer. This is a poetry collection about the aftermath and everything that comes after a sexual assault. These poems were so beautiful, so beautifully written, and so incredibly important. They talk about things like consent and forgiving yourself and being raped by a loved one, like by a partner, and what that means, how victim blaming comes into it, and how you feel like in your body, and the blame that comes with it, and learning to forgive yourself, learning to perhaps forgive your attacker if you have that in you, but it doesn't necessarily have to be part of your path. This was just so important when it comes to discussions about sexual violence for both genders. And I really wish that if you have it in you, if you're interested in poetry and you want to read more about this topic or get to know that topic a bit better, this is wonderful. And for me, it wasn't too triggering, though I've not experienced sexual assault myself. So take care of yourself, but I would highly recommend this to everyone, and I think this is going to be my favorite poetry collection of the year. Then I discovered The Majesty of Overdrive through my library system, and I listened to 2 mysteries. The first was The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. This was a lovely buddy read with Katie from Books and Things, and this was a recommendation and sent to me from Kate Howe. I didn't get on with this writing style at all, pretty much, and I switched to an audiobook after a few concerned people on Goodreads said, try the audiobook, see if you'll like it better there. I did enjoy listening to the audiobook. I thought the narrator was excellent, but there was no psychological depth in here. There was also very little emotional depth as well. You had characters who were grieving, but that item wasn't explored, and Flavia didn't seem to connect with anyone besides Dogger and a police inspector. So I thought that there were very many different little aspects of this book that I enjoyed, but put together, the writing style couldn't put it all together for me the way that I wanted. So I'm glad that I gave this a try, and I'm bummed that I didn't love it more than I thought I would, because I thought I would love this, but that's just not the case. I'm glad that I tried it, but yeah, not for me. Then I listened to Whose Body by Dorothy Sayers. This is the first Lord Peter Wimsey book. This was another Kate Howe sent. She didn't get on with this very well, and I didn't either. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. I really loved the narrator for the audiobook. I think her name is May something. I will add it on the screen here. And that was a fun experience, but I found that this is like a classic mystery. Think like Agatha Christie. I don't get on with that very well. I can't quite put my finger on why it didn't mesh well with me, but it just wasn't my taste. I really appreciated the slight discussion of shell shock in Lord Peter's character, and I thought that the mystery was quite clever, but I didn't connect with any of the characters, and it felt very dated for me. So I'm, again, glad that I tried this, but I don't think I'm going to be picking up more Dorothy Sayers. And the final thing I finished was another poetry collection, Belly of the Beast by Ash Vernon. I give this 4 out of 5 stars. I liked a lot some of the poems, and I liked most of the poems. This wasn't as beautifully written for my taste of poetry as the No You Never Listened To, but it was more beautifully written than the Jane and Bertha in Me. So I thought that this definitely sits smack in the middle between that 5-star and 3-star poetry collections respectively. This talks about relationships and it has very brutal, raw language at times. It has also a lot of mythological sort of references and a bit of fairy tale references in there as well. Some really fun plays with language, but overall I just really liked it rather than loved it, which I hope will be the case for all poetry collections I pick up. So that was my reading month of September. A couple 5 stars, many 4 stars, and many 3 and 2 stars. Not too bad. I'm excited for what I got through and excited also for what's to come with my reading life. Now, since this is the final day of Quotidian Cyborg, I thought that we should celebrate with some party hats. So there's my fancy party hat that's not going to be in frame. I really hope that you enjoyed Quotidian Cyborg, which, in case you didn't know if you're coming at this late, sorry, the hat needed to be in the frame. So Quotidian Cyborg is I made a video every single day in the month of September, and I had a lot of fun making all of the videos for you, and I think that you guys enjoyed seeing all those videos as well. It was definitely hard work, but really enjoyable and gratifying at the end, and I think I'm going to be doing a Pajama Sunday where I talk a little bit more about the experience of doing Quotidian Cyborg. I really hope you enjoyed the month of September. I hope that you had a fantastic reading month and just like interpersonal month as well. I hope that the season has changed toward like awesome traditional autumn for you. For me in California, that's just not so. It's still very, very hot and we're having a bit of a heat wave, which is annoying. But in any case, I am rebelliously burning all of my autumn candles and drinking tea no matter what and trying to have a good time. And of course, as always, read some lovely books. So thank you very much for joining me on the Quotidian Cyborg journey, and until next time, continue to be lovely. You are an adorable hat. Thank you to my patrons who support me on Patreon, and a special shout out to Shloka C, who is a new patron. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for supporting me through Patreon. I really, really appreciate it. As I keep saying, I just continuously, every day, daily, quotidian, I appreciate you. And I hope you're having a lovely day, reading beautiful books and wearing beautiful hats. Bye.